Don't move the light. Whatever you do, child, don't move that light up off its face. Well now, settle on in. Pull that blanket up under your chin. Let your shoulders go soft, and let that old static finish fading on out of your ears. You're safe here, in the dark, with me. My name's Silas Vance. Some folks round the holler just call me Abe. And I've spent the better part of my life walking ridgelines that don't rightly want to be walked, listening to things that don't rightly want to be heard. Tonight I'm going to tell you about a young hiker, a solo wanderer who took to the Appalachian spine for the quiet of it, the solitude, the kind of silence that's supposed to heal a tired mind. It did not heal him. This happened on a stretch of ridge so far back in the high country that the maps just call it unmaintained. Late autumn, the kind of cold that creeps in under your collar slow, the way a secret does. He'd started that morning under a pale, indifferent sky, but by early afternoon the fog had rolled up out of the valley like the mountain itself was exhaling, thick and wet and the color of an old bruise. It pressed down on him, sat heavy on his shoulders. Every step up that switchback felt like dragging a sled of river stones, his pack straps cutting grooves into muscles that had long since stopped complaining and started simply aching, deep and dull, in that way that tells you your body is running on fumes and stubbornness alone. The trail narrowed as the light died. Rhododendron thickets clawed at his sleeves. Roots, slick with the day's drizzle, reached up out of the dark earth like they were trying to trip him, to keep him out there just a little longer than was safe. And the rain, oh, it had been coming down soft and fine since noon. But as dusk swallowed the ridge whole, it turned into something heavier, steady, relentless. A cold, percussive downpour that found every gap in his jacket and turned his fingers to stiff, clumsy things. By the time true dark settled over that ridge, he'd lost all sense of distance, the way a body does when fatigue starts whispering louder than reason. Every fallen log looked the same as the last. His headlamp, still dim then, just a low yellow glow bobbing along the wet trail, caught nothing but more black trunks, more glistering leaves, more of that endless gray fog rolling through the hemlocks like it had nowhere better to be. He thought more than once of just stopping right there on the trail, curling up against a tree till morning. That's how tired does it to a man. Makes foolish ideas sound reasonable. But something kept his legs moving. Some old stubborn instinct that knows the difference between resting and quitting. He told himself just one more bend, just one more rise. And then, there it was. A three-sided lean-to, weathered gray, its old wood soft with rot at the corners, sitting tucked into a stand of hemlocks like the mountain had grown it there itself. A rusted tin roof, streaked dark with age and water stains, the kind that hums under rain like a held note that never quite resolves. He near wept at the sight of it. Lord, the relief of a roof, even half a roof, even a roof open clean on one side to the wide black night. He hauled himself up onto the worn wooden platform, shrugged free of his pack, and felt that particular gratitude that only comes to a body that's pushed itself past where it wanted to go. He laid out his bag, heavy, synthetic filled, built for winter nights just like this one, and he zipped himself down into it, slow, savoring the way the warmth gathered round him, the way the rain on tin became a lullaby instead of a threat. The shelter was old, see? Built decades back by hands long since stilled. The kind of structure the Forest Service forgets to maintain, and the mountain quietly reclaims, inch by inch, year by year. Its roof joists ran low, awful low, maybe 4 feet above where a grown man's chest would rest, laying flat. He didn't think much on that. Why would he? Most folks don't think on the architecture of safety until something makes them. He propped his boots near the open side, let the rain hiss against the toes of him, and watched the dark beyond the shelter's edge the way a man watches a fire, half mesmerized, half just glad of something to look at besides the inside of his own tired skull. He found himself thinking, in that loose and drifting way exhaustion allows, about how quiet a mountain truly is once you stop fighting it. How a ridge at midnight holds a stillness that feels almost sacred, almost watchful, like the land itself is holding its breath right alongside you. He didn't know yet how right that feeling was. For an hour, maybe 2, there was nothing but that rain, that low, drumming, endless rain, and the particular black of a ridge at midnight, where even the moon's been swallowed whole by cloud. He drifted toward sleep the way a man drifts toward the edge of a dock, slow, unaware, content. And then he heard it, a scratch, soft, up in the rafters, right above where his head lay. He didn't move. Didn't even open his eyes proper. Mice, he thought. Field mice, nesting up in the old insulation, disturbed maybe by the warmth of his breath rising up off the sleeping bag. Common enough thing in a shelter this old. He'd heard worse on other nights. Porcupines under floorboards, raccoons in the eaves. This was nothing. This was nature doing what nature does in places like this, indifferent to him entirely. It came again and again, a patient little rhythm, scratch, 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 scratch. He let his breathing slow. It the way you do when you're trying to coax your own body back toward sleep. And the scratching slowed with him. Now, child, I want you to sit with that a moment, same as he did. Though he didn't understand it the way we're gonna understand it together right now, safe and warm where we are. Mice don't pace themselves to a man's lungs. Mice don't listen. He told himself it was coincidence. He told himself a great many comforting things, the way the mind does when it's half asleep and unwilling to climb the awful staircase of a darker truth. But the scratching kept time with him. Breath in, pause, scratch. Breath out, pause, scratch. Over and over, a rhythm too exact, too patient, too aware to belong to anything small and blind and simply nesting. He should have just let it be, but he didn't. He was tired and cold and curious. In that particular way, exhaustion makes a man curious, reckless almost, like the part of his brain that knew better had gone to sleep ahead of the rest of him. So he reached one stiff arm up out of the warm dark of his bag, fumbled for the headlamp resting on the floor beside him, clicked it on, thumbed it up to its highest, brightest setting, and he turned the light straight up into the rafters. For one breath, one single suspended breath, there was only the white wash of the headlamp beam against old gray wood. Cobwebs, a scatter of dead leaves blown in through some forgotten gap. Nothing. He almost laughed at himself. Almost. Because that's when his eyes adjusted to the brightness, and the shape that had been hiding in plain sight pressed so flat and so still against the cold tin that it had looked at first glance like just another shadow among shadows. That shape resolved itself into something his mind did not want to receive. It was long, longer than a man has any right being, wedged horizontal between two narrow roof beams not 18 inches apart, its frame somehow flattened, compressed, folded into a space far too small for the sheer wrongness of its length. Gray skin, the color of river clay left out too long in winter, stretched tight and thin over a frame that bent in places a frame should never bend. Elbows that ran the wrong direction. A spine that curved twice where a spine should curve once. Its joints made a sound, a soft, wet popping, slow and rhythmic, like knuckles cracking deep underwater, as it held its impossible body pressed flush against the crossbeams, perfectly parallel, perfectly still, like it had practiced being still for longer than he'd been alive. And its eyes, Lord, its eyes were open, wide, glassy, the kind of black on black you see in a still pond at midnight. No white to 'em at all, pointed straight down into the beam of his headlamp, straight down into him. It had been there the whole time, 4 feet above his face, watching him fall asleep, watching him breathe. He could not move. And I do not mean that as a manner of speaking, child. I mean his body, his arms, his legs, his whole tired frame was zipped tight down into that heavy winter mummy bag, the kind built snug round the shoulders to trap a body's heat, the kind that turns a man into something close to a chrysalis. He could wiggle his fingers. He could shift his hips an inch, maybe 2. That was the whole of his freedom in that moment. 2 inches of give inside a nylon shell, a headlamp clutched in one stiff hand, and something ancient and wrong hanging 4 feet above his chest, staring down the beam of light like it was waiting on him to blink first. It did not lunge. It did not screech. It did not do any of the things his racing mind in its animal terror half expected and almost wished for, because at least a lunge would be over quick. Instead, it simply watched, patient, utterly, impossibly patient, the way only something that has waited in dark rafters for far longer than a single human lifetime can be patient. He understood, somewhere down in the oldest part of his brain, the part that still remembers being prey, exactly what it was doing. It was waiting on the batteries. Headlamp batteries don't last forever, child. And it knew that. It knew that better than he did. He didn't dare look away from it to check the little battery indicator down at the base of the lamp. He didn't dare blink longer than he had to. Every second that light stayed bright and steady on that gray, glassy-eyed face was a second it stayed pinned up there against the beams, frozen, held in place by nothing more than the thin, fragile mercy of illumination. Time stopped meaning anything in any ordinary sense. There was only the rain on tin, steady as a heartbeat slowing down. There was only the cold tightening its grip on the shelter, a cold that seemed to deepen the longer that thing hung there, unmoving, 4 feet above his trapped and straining body. There was only the small, terrible math running in the back of his skull. How many hours till dawn? How many minutes of battery left? Which one would run out first? And then, slow as a held breath, finally letting go, he watched the mist begin. It came from its mouth, or what passed for a mouth anyhow. A thin, gray scene that had been closed this whole time, and now was opening, just a fraction, letting loose a slow, curling breath of cold, pale vapor that drifted downward through the beam of light, like smoke sinking instead of rising, against every law that smoke ought to obey. The mist touched his face first, cold, colder than the autumn night around him, colder than the rain, a cold that seemed to settle directly into his chest, into the marrow, into whatever quiet animal part of him still remembered what it meant to be afraid of the dark. His headlamp beam blurred, softened, the light scattering through that slow gray fog until the creature above him became less a shape and more a suggestion, a darker patch within the haze, still watching, still patient, still perfectly parallel to them old crossbeams. And that was when the arm began to move. One long, pale limb, folded tight along its side this whole endless night, began with a soft and terrible series of wet popping joints to unbend, slowly, almost gently, if such a word could ever belong to something like this. Elbow first, bend in the wrong direction, then forearm, then a hand with too many joints in each long gray finger, reaching downward through that drifting mist, downward through the thinning beam of failing light, downward toward the trapped and helpless shape zipped tight into that winter bag below. He could not move his legs to kick free. He could not move his arms enough to do anything but grip that headlamp tighter, watch that flickering beam, watch the battery indicator finally dip toward red. He could only lie there, swallowed in cold mist, listening to the slow, wet popping of an arm that had waited in darkness for longer than memory, reaching for him with the patience of stone. I won't tell you what happened next, child, not because I don't know, but because some things are better left folding themselves quietly back into the dark, the way that mist eventually folded back up into them rafters, the way that headlamp eventually, inevitably, flickered and dimmed and went still. What I can tell you is this. They found his pack at that shelter 3 days later. His bag, zipped tight, empty. And up in them low rafters, wedged between the beams, something had left a mark in the dust. Something long. Something that had been lying there a real long while. The search party noted other things, too. Things that didn't make the official report. A smell up under that tin roof, cold and mineral, like wet stone in deep winter. Deep scratches in the old crossbeams, the kind that don't come from claws so much as from fingers, pressing into the same worn grooves night after night for longer than any ranger could account for. But shelters like that one dot the whole spine of these mountains, child. Hundreds of them. Quiet, three-sided, half-forgotten, with low rafters built by men who never thought to wonder what else might find that gap a comfortable place to wait. So here's my counsel to you, drifter. On whatever ridge or rooftop or quiet room you're resting your head tonight, if something scratches above you in the dark, and it slows when you slow, and it breathes when you breathe, don't reach for the light. Some things up in the rafters are better left believed to be mice. Stay close to your fires, friends. Stay low on open ridges after dark. And stay safe in the hollows.